Well, how nice. Even before I said calling us back to session, how quietly you got. Thank you so much. With that note, I'd like to call us back to regular session. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Matsuoka.
But before we rise, thank you. You guys are so automatic. Hey, yesterday was Veterans Day across our country. And so before we say the Pledge of Allegiance, not a moment of silence, but just a moment of recognition, of appreciation for those who've served in the past, who are currently serving in our armed forces, and those who will future serve our country. So with that, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas tardes, tenemos interpretación al español, tenemos audífonos por si alguien gusta escuchar la presentación en español. Good evening. In order to provide language access, we have Spanish interpretation available.
Thank you. Headsets for the hearing impaired are also available. Please indicate if you should need a headset. So a quick announcement from closed session. We took 3 actions in closed session. The board voted unanimously to approve case OAH 2019080701 in the amount of $234,700. The motion was made by Ms. Munoz and seconded by Dr. Reed. And just so that I'm clear, our unanimous vote in closed session was 4-0, as Ms. Ford just joined us at 6:27, just so that we're clear on that. Next action taken, the board voted unanimously to approve a 1-day suspension of a classified employee. Motion by Dr. Reed, second by Ms. Capps. Final action, the board voted unanimously to approve termination of a classified employee. Motion by Dr. Reed, second by Sims Moten. Thank you. We will next have the superintendent's report.
Thank you for all who are here tonight. We come back to our nice, cozy little boardroom here. At the last board meeting, I announced my retirement after, what will be 40 years of service. And I've been receiving emails from close in and far away. News has been spreading back to the Bay Area and actually across the country, so it's been really gratifying to hear congratulations and just a great career. So I still have 7.5 more months of service. The work keeps coming, and I will continue to serve as your superintendent. It's been an honor to be here, and I look forward to a process of sharing, the future for the district, but also leaving this in good hands. So those are my only comments tonight. Thank you.
Next, move to board comments and correspondence. Board members. Ms. Capps.
Thank you. Yes, 2 things. We just had this wonderful study session with students on sustainability, and so I wanted to thank the staff for organizing that. It was representatives from each of the high schools talking about their wishes and ideas and smart ideas about ways in which our schools can be more sustainable. So it was great to hear their thoughts. So thanks to that. And secondly, I'm proud that one of the first actions we took as a board was to support our immigrant families in this district. Many immigrant families with a resolution in support. And today is a really pivotal day in the lives of a lot of people with the Supreme Court hearing the case on DACA. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. I know that this could be a time of uncertainty for many families, and fingers crossed. It says it very lightly because it's such an important program. So just wanted to lend my support and acknowledge this important time. Thanks.
Okay, board members. Ms. Ford.
Thank you. I really appreciate, Mr. Matsuoka, that you brought up Veterans Day. Yesterday, I was thinking a lot about my father, who was a veteran Marine Corps officer, fought in 3 wars, and then came home to Santa Barbara and was a teacher at Monroe. So yesterday was a time to think about him. Also, before I left on my vacation, I was very pleased and proud to be a part of the ribbon cutting for the Lost Forest preschool. What a beautiful facility and an amazing staff, and of course supported by district staff who made it all sort of happen behind the scenes. So that was a great event. That's it for me.
Any additional board comments? Dr. Reed?
Real quickly, just to sort of reiterate what Ms. Capps said, but student voice is really crucial. and the opportunity that we had today was amazing, to hear the voices of our students. And I think that I would hope that we continue to have that opportunity. Last year, it was a terrific opportunity when we met with the students around this time, and they went back to their campuses and came up with action plans for ideas and situations that they wanted to change. And I think what's really important is we are a district to support our students. And we told them today, you have a voice, and your voice means something. So I want to just publicly say that, and that we actually invited them to the meeting. Not all of them came, maybe not any of them, but the idea that they would like to have an opportunity to have a dialogue with us. And so I'd like to see how we might move forward in that way. It couldn't necessarily be in this meeting in a dais format, but student voice is crucial, and I look forward to working and hearing more about what they come up with when they go back to their sites to talk about what we talked about today around sustainability. So, thanks.
Ms. Munoz?
Yes, I also wanted to share about learning from the students today about sustainability. Several of them are in a horticulture class at San Marcos High School, and I learned from them, and they had great ideas in terms of what they'd like to do at their schools, what can be also expanded at other schools. And I talked to them about getting familiar with how the board meetings are and how we can continue the conversation also. So I really appreciated that. I've also participated in the multilingual pathway meeting on Monday, November 4th. We've been making a lot of progress on that, and I'm looking forward to this coming Monday on November 18th to continue that conversation and continue our work in terms of preparing that, in partnership with so many community leaders, also school staff, parents, and students that are involved, and we're all there as equals. I was able to go to McKinley School and spoke with the Spanish-speaking parents there with the Parent-School Partnership. I was invited to talk about the school district itself and the role of the board. And also, we spoke a lot about the day-to-day issues that they face as parents and concern about, the safety of their children and how we can improve and work together, work hand in hand on that. We had a seminar at a busy 2 weeks. We also had a seminar on October 30th. The local social work group organized it, responding to threats of gun violence in the high school. And Fran Wageneck and Kelly Moore participated in that, along with a leader from the Coalition to End Gun Violence and Moms Demand Action. During the meeting itself, we had an incident at one of our campuses, and it was evident. It was, Kelly Moore left for a little bit and then came back to assure that all the students at the after-school program and McKinley were safe. And it was a very good, a lot of question and answer and a good time for dialogue. So I appreciated that, and thank you so much for participating.
And I'll just close what I just echo many comments of my board members. And the Lost Flores event was a sweet event, and to see the little kids there, and certainly that is due to my heart with the early care and education. So I was glad to be able to be there and part of that ribbon cutting. I also just want to add, I also had the opportunity last year to participate in the student study session, and I happened to sit at a table where there were some students who had come out of the traditional high school and needed perspective, and they needed to figure out who they were and things that they wanted to do, and they wanted to work on themselves to make sure they're getting back into the traditional high school and to graduate. And so it came full circle over the past weekend. I saw one of those students, and to see her so bright and seeing her get her life in order. She's at City College, really happy doing that. So it's always good for us to share this out to the community, what is going on. We have students who struggle, but we also see their successes as through their determination to get it right. And so I saw a bright smile on her face, and so it was a good thing to be able to see that when they are saying what their struggles are and willing to do the work to make sure that they move to that next level. So with that, Ms. Capps will go to public comments.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody who wants to speak. We have quite a handful, so we're going to have the 90-second limit here tonight. Thanks again. You all, I think, know the rules by now, but I will give you a 30-second warning. So I'm going to call first Robert Lori, I believe, on the Santa Barbara High School track. Maybe it's Loonby. I can't read your last name very well. Followed by Bill Oliphant, followed by Anthony Marotti. You gentlemen are up.
And Board, these public comments are connected to the letter that's been handed to all of us.
Great. Yeah, minute 30. Thank you much. We did, because we have quite a few.
Wow, okay. Good evening. My name is Tony Marotti, class of 1964, Santa Barbara High School, and we're here to introduce the Bill Crow project to name the track over at Santa Barbara High School, the new facility, under the legendary Crow project, Bill Crow. And I guess 90 seconds is just going to give me a chance to tell you this was a great man. We're honored to have worked with him. My friends here, we all come from 55 years ago and more to having the opportunity to deal with this great man. He was spending his entire life on the campus of Santa Barbara High School. He was a track star in 1932, and that was on the track we're talking about tonight, by the way. And he got his teaching credentials. He taught in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and came back later to be a CIF official. He touched the lives of thousands and thousands of young people, us included, and we hope you recognize him and put this on the agenda for December, because this man had poise and grace and dignity and a level of professionalism rarely seen in this sport. We honor him greatly, and this would do justice to that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board, Mr. Matsuoka, Dr. Becchio. I had a whole thing set up about this, but I think we're going to have to cut it with the time limit. But there's a history of naming facilities for people who have gone the extra mile. And you look around, and I guess probably the all-time one was Mr. Peabody. And owner of Arrow Shirt Company, who came here and actually designed and helped build Santa Barbara High School. But of course, he was president of the Board of Education. I don't know if you knew that, but he was. There'll be no test on this, but anyway. You go around to the different schools. I'll just throw out some for instances. Dos Pueblos High School, football, baseball, their fields are named for Scott O'Leary, a beautiful man who did so much for the district. And then you go to San Marcos, Sut Paloa, field named for him.
30 seconds.
They even named a press box for Mr. Mullaney, who was an auto shop teacher. He was the voice of the Royals for 35 years. John Stoney, he got the short end. They named the tennis courts for him. Okay? Santa Barbara High School, Eddie Matthews, Major League Hall of Fame, Santa Barbara High. Walker Diamond, coach for 44 years.
Yep.
Okay? Then you take it even further down, and thanks to Dr. Becchio here, Santa Barbara Junior High, Oliphant Field. Boy, what a strange name. 40 years spent there. And as John said in his closing remarks, at one time, you can't put a price on this kind of thing. Coaches get probably, when it's all figured out, probably less than $1 an hour. So that we know that we've done it for the love of it and never regretted a moment. And it's nice to see you drive by and see your name up, not in lights, but you see it up on the fence, and it's kind of cool.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to pass this on to the next gentleman. This is Bob Looney, and he was a pole vaulter, among other things, all CIF in several sports, and was a student and athlete at Santa Barbara High School under Coach Crow. Bob Looney.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to say growing up in Santa Barbara, track and field was synonymous with the name Bill Crow in Santa Barbara. I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with him. My senior year, I was a CIF and state pole vault champion, so I got to travel quite a bit with the coach individually to invitational meets, and I really got to see how well respected he was, not only in Santa Barbara, but throughout Southern California. And I've always been of the belief that you earn your history. And I think that this man, who was a student at Santa Barbara High, coached there for over 3 decades, put in his sweat equity. And even when I was playing football, he was always out. You'd see Coach Crow out there trying to make some improvement on the track. So I think that we would really do him a disservice for a man who did so much for this community if we are neglecting to name the track after Coach Bill Crow. And I hope we are on your agenda in December. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, you three. We'll next move on to other public comment. Mr. John Morse, followed by Dr. Elise Simmons, followed by Moni DeWitt. And just to repeat, I know this is less time than you might have anticipated. We'd be happy to read whatever you might have prepared if you don't mind emailing it to us. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm John Morse. I'm a member of Fair Education Santa Barbara. I'm here to speak tonight about an email that was sent out by Kelly Choi on October 20, 2019 to Dos Pueblos teachers and staff. In that email, she states that the Fair Education in Santa Barbara and Save Our Schools have been, quote, mistreating district staff and, quote, maligning our work, end quote. That email suggests that we want to, quote, tear down their work. There's no facts been presented to support any of these allegations. Is it mistreating staff to fill out Williams Act complaints regarding the bathrooms at Santa Barbara High? Pointing out that the bathroom funds have been available in bond funds voted in 2016, yet nothing was allotted until April 2019. Is it mistreating staff to point out that the Williams Act complaints about the intercom at Dos Pueblos High? I could go on, but nothing's been there. But I want to make it clear to the teachers that we're on your side. We have not been criticizing the teachers. We've been pointing out that the teachers are doing the best they can. What we object to is the district spending loads of LCAP money on its friends and the nonprofits, money which should be better spent for certificated staff.
Thank you. Dr. Elise Simmons, again followed by Moni DeWitt, followed by Ellen Hunter.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Dr. Becchio, Ms. Carey, Mr. Matsuoka. As you know, I'm the principal of Santa Barbara High, and principals don't often speak during public comments, and this is my 3rd time now in 21 years of working for Santa Barbara Unified that I'm here speaking to you tonight. Last time I was here, I spoke about the importance of not allowing a small group of community members control our narrative, and so I'm here again to add my voice. Since the last meeting, I have been in contact with one media journalist, and I appreciated that talk. We spoke for about 2.5 hours over coffee one Saturday morning. I was also joined by Todd Rickman and Anna Scharfeld, and it was one of those conversations that has really led to a relationship that's going to allow for a more whole narrative to be told in our community. One of the things that I am here again tonight is to invite the media and our Board of Trustees, and actually any community member, to come to Santa Barbara High.
30 seconds.
Join me and to see what we're doing. Come walk the campus with me, see firsthand the beauty and the areas that need improvement, meet the hardworking staff as they personalize each and every lesson. Ask the students about what equity means to them and why it's important that their teachers participate in programs offered by Just Communities. And talk with the 4,000 or so parents that are pleased with Santa Barbara Unified, and many of which have purposely chosen for their child to attend public high school over the private schools in town. Our current leadership of the Santa Barbara Unified School District is the most transparent, honest, and equity-minded group of educators that I've ever worked with and for. And so again, I did not become an educator to join in this zero-sum game that the small minority is telling our community. This is not a zero-sum game. I became an educator to help create a community where all voices are heard, valued, and celebrated.
Thank you. Moni DeWitt. Again, followed by Ellen Hunter, followed by Sherry Ray.
Hi there. I understand you want to hear from the voices of everyone, and one of the main reasons I would like to let you know is I'm here for the voices of the invisible, the dyslexics. They are less than 101 are their scores on they're the lowest of the district. They're behind the poor Latinx, they're behind everybody. And I know you're interested in equity, but if you want true equity, people need to learn how to read. That is the number one thing for equity and our A through Gs. So I'll read you a quote from Dr. Meckebaum, one of the leading trauma on expert of violence, and he says the most influential health professional of the last century. He said, one thing is most important to traumatized children than anything else, more important than therapy, more important than social programs, more important than anything else. The research shows the single most powerful predictor of their ability to overcome trauma and survive their circumstances is the ability to read. If they can read, they have a chance to find success in school and overcome all those terrible things in their lives.
30 seconds.
Okay, so let's focus on literacy, and when we pick our next superintendent, I would encourage you to please be sure that he is competent in the science of reading. We can bring up the scores and meet the needs, the unmet needs of 3,000 people in our district. And I would like to say also, let's not demonize each other, because I'm here for the unmet needs of dyslexics. I'm dyslexic. It's traumatizing to be dyslexic and not have your needs met. So we're all on the same team. We're here for the kids. And let's do something about it.
Thank you. Ellen Hunter, followed by Sherry Ray, followed by Lauren Berlin.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Ellen Hunter, and I'm a teacher at Monroe Elementary, kindergarten teacher, and the mother of 3 adult children who all attended Santa Barbara Unified. I'm here tonight to support the work of our district, to support the work of the board members, and to support the work of all SB Unified staff who are here tonight. We are thoughtful, dedicated, fair, and committed members of our educational community here in Santa Barbara. Every child, every chance, every day. That is how I try to approach every single day that I teach in the classroom. Now, having said that, are we perfect? No, we're not perfect. Is the system perfect? No, the system is not perfect. But everybody has imperfections, as do I, but I still, every day, every child, every chance, every day.
30 seconds.
We do not give up on our students ever, no matter what the color of your skin is. It does not matter. I have a concern after visiting the website of Fair Education. I noticed something that kind of bothered me. Fair Education, this is a quote, Santa Barbara is a nonprofit corporation formed to advocate for our children, students, and teachers in our public schools and universities. For the record, I just want to clarify that Fair Education does not represent me. Fair Education does not represent the students in my classroom. They are not advocating for me or the students. And that is a concern. And I know there's a concern over implicit bias training. However, implicit bias training is not new.
Thank you. You can finish your sentence. I don't mean to cut you off.
My husband works at Raytheon, and he has implicit bias training. It is a common thing.
Thank you. Okay, Sherry Ray, followed by Lauren Berlin, followed by James Spector.
Well, good evening. I had 3 minutes exactly timed, so I'm going to rush through this. The good news about the dyslexia report recently is that the district recognizes that the science of reading with its structured, systematic approach works. The question is how to implement this approach to maximize the opportunity to increase literacy for all students in the district. It's overwhelming to think about meeting the needs of 3,000 dyslexic students without a roadmap. They are all on a continuum of needs from mild to severe. Statistically speaking, though, in a district of 15,000 students, K through 6 has approximately 20 dyslexic students per grade per campus in 11 elementary schools, and in 7 through 12, approximately 36 per grade per campus in 7 secondary schools. That's a little bit more manageable. This is solvable and a beginning. But my speaking to you for 3 minutes 90 seconds, every 2 weeks about dyslexia is not going to lead to any significant understanding of this admittedly complex issue. There are
30
many
seconds.
questions that need to be answered about the pilot, and I am alarmed at the prospect of implementing it and spending $400,000 in philanthropic donations on it. Discussion needs to happen about how to develop a scalable, comprehensive approach while addressing the needs of students, educators, and parents, and utilizing the professional knowledge of longtime dyslexia specialists and adhering to the law. When dyslexia has been successfully addressed in other districts across the nation, it's taken a teamwork approach, as in Fairfax County, Virginia, Upper Arlington, Ohio, and even in Los Angeles Unified School District. A lot has been said recently about all the curriculum and equity for students, and I would just like to suggest that there are numerous dyslexic heroes like George Washington, George Patton, and Winston Churchill, and our dyslexic students deserve to know about them as well.
Thank you very much. Lauren Berlin, followed by James Fechner, followed by Jill Rivera.
Hi, good evening, Board of Trustees. My name's Lauren Berlin, and I'm the principal of Alta Vista and La Cuesta High Schools. I've worked in this district for 8 years and in positions at the elementary, junior high, and high school levels. And in my career, I've worked in public schools in 3 different counties, serving a wide and very diverse range of students and families. At the last board meeting, I heard administrative and teaching colleagues of mine share their positive experiences and their pride in working for Santa Barbara Unified School District. I heard my colleagues challenge the community to engage in a productive dialogue and in problem solving that supports all of our students across the district in achieving academic excellence. I am here tonight to share my voice. When I look back at the past 8 years that I have worked in this school district, I can confidently state that with our current superintendent and cabinet team, we have the strongest, most collaborative, innovative, and equity-minded support team of educational leaders under which I have ever worked in this or any other school district.
30 seconds.
There is a shared vision and focus on excellence for all students that challenges each of us as leaders and teachers to push ourselves every day. And we still have work to do. There is absolutely room for improvement in the test scores. And while our students are performing well and sometimes better than others in our states, it's not enough. This is why we do what we do. I have never met an educator in this district, a colleague or a leader, who is satisfied with the status quo. We want to see improvement, and I believe that we need to do that work together. Like my colleagues, I encourage community members, board members to come out to our sites and ask and see what it is that we're doing.
Thank you very much. Mr. James Fechner, followed by Jill Rivera, followed by Jared Schwartz.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and it's very nice to see so many beautiful teachers out there. Jared, I don't know if you're going to ask me again to come to one of your trainings, but you know I've been to 2 of them. I've actually been to 1.5. I brought my wife, but she'll never come back. She was raised in the Soviet Union and is very sensitive to this type of propaganda. If you're looking for fair education, please also look at our disclaimers. These are written by teachers who are not protected by this school district, students who are not protected by this school district. It's on our site. Please continue to read. We have no issue with implicit bias training. We have an issue with bias training. And I would encourage everyone to look at the amount of money that has gone out of the district into this person's pocket.
30 seconds.
You can get this stuff for free. It can be transparent for all, and it doesn't need to be divisive. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Jill Rivera, again, followed by Jared Schwartz, followed by Phyllis Cohen.
Hi there. It's so great to see how many people are in this room. When I started coming to the board meetings about a year and some change ago, I was a candidate for the school board, and I think I was party of one. So, good on you. I love how the community is coming together. I love seeing the RED, which stands for Red for Ed, and I'm in agreement with many of their platforms, including more pay for teachers and more resources to do your job more effectively. And it's just so great to see how this room has completely transformed, and I think that's wonderful. People that have heard me speak before know that I'm very passionate about early childhood literacy and foundations for math, because we know that if our kids have a good foundation, then they can stay with their class and we won't have an achievement gap problem or as many when they get older. I want to address the need for a
30
current,
seconds.
a systematic, explicit, comprehensive phonics program. I understand that we're using the methodology of whole language, but kids are individuals and one size does not always fit all. So I'm asking that because our kids all learn differently, can we just resource the teachers with some great phonics curriculum so that all kids can get a better head start? Thank you.
Thank you. Jared Schwartz, followed by Phyllis Cohen.
Good evening, I'm Jared Schwartz, Executive Director of Just Communities. As promised, I have curricular overview for all of our core programs that we're currently running with the school district coming around. And for the third board meeting in a row, I'm making my offer to Fair Education Santa Barbara to facilitate 2 workshops for them, and I still have not heard back from them. Also, for those who have not heard...
Excuse me, let me just stop this. Excuse me. In your public comments, you're addressing the board, not each other. So can we please, I'm saying this to both, okay? You have a slip to address the board, so let's be respectful of that. So can we do that? Thank you.
For those who may not have heard, on October 29th, the local judge granted Just Communities' anti-SLAPP motion to strike all of Fair Education Santa Barbara's discrimination claims as to our organization. For those who aren't familiar with it, a SLAPP lawsuit is a strategic lawsuit against public participation that is intended to censor, intimidate, and silence a particular person or entity by burdening them with the cost of a legal defense until they abandon their efforts. Anti-SLAPP laws are designed to provide for early dismissal of meritless lawsuits filed against people for the exercise of First Amendment rights. The court agreed with our anti-SLAPP motion and struck down Fair Education Santa Barbara's discrimination claims against Just Communities, demonstrating that those claims were not properly brought against us.
30 seconds.
Here are just a few quotes from the 23-page decision by Judge Anderley. Quote, "This conclusion is consistent with the brief evidence provided by Just Communities that the Talking in Class program is a voluntary program with students participating from a range of backgrounds. There is therefore no evidentiary basis for any claim of improper discrimination as it relates to the Talking in Class program. With regards to IEE, the ruling states the written materials, our curriculum, discuss an approach to addressing racism and discrimination based on its assumptions and qualifications through multiple methods, including experiential learning.
Thank you.
Viewed as a whole, drawing upon to show the program violates asserted statutory prohibitions against unlawful discrimination. FESB's inferences of a discriminatory meaning in particular PowerPoint slides are not supported by the evidence presented." I'll pass this.
Thank you very much. And that Phyllis Cohen is our last speaker. Welcome.
Good evening. Be still my heart. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Felice Cohen. I am a substitute teacher of this absolutely beautiful community. I've been a substitute teacher for the last 13 years. I'm a transplant from Illinois. I have several degrees, and I'm very happy to share it with our students in Santa Barbara. My focus of being here tonight and to share some information with you is to please let you know that I'm extremely concerned about the atmosphere in the classrooms. I have left 3 schools in the last few months of verbal abuse. Just recently, last week, I was offended and I was assaulted, being called FU white B because I was trying to take attendance. I need to tell you that I'm extremely concerned about the disrespect, the entitlement,
30
the
seconds.
rudeness. I am to a point that I'm actually going to stop substituting, and I am not of that opinion myself. There are a lot of people that I connect with who are substitute teachers who are not wanting to do this anymore because we're all experiencing physical threats and also verbal abuse. And $20 an hour does not supply me enough so that I could be abused and disrespected in that respect. And I humbly ask you, your statement over here, it says that we prepare students for a world that is yet to be created. Then I guess my question to you, ladies and gentlemen, is what are we creating and what are we growing? because I am greatly concerned. And I am from Israel, and I have a very different training, and we're not doing what we need to be doing for our students.
Thank
And
you.
I don't know what it is that we need to do to heal the situation, but I stand ready to assist.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
President Sims Moten, that concludes public comment.
Thank you. So next we'll move to item E, acceptance of donations. Do I hear a motion?
I move to accept with gratitude the donations to our school district.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. We'll move into our consent agenda, and there is some public comment request. Ms. Capps.
Yes, on item, the first item, so that would be F1, approval of staff travel. We have one request from the public to speak. Thank you for the phonetic spelling, Mr. Ron Lichty.
Morning, board. Afternoon, board. My name is Ron Lichty. I'm a longtime Santa Barbara resident, taxpayer of income taxes and property taxes. As such, I have every right to voice my opinion about how my tax dollars are spent. In fact, I'm here tonight to give voice to those countless thousands of taxpayers out there that get up every day, go to work, and dutifully pay their taxes. The voters and taxpayers of Santa Barbara County place a lot of trust and faith in you people, this board, to spend our funds prudently. And I think that the expenditure of $4,125 to fund a trip to DC for one of our board members to attend an equity symposium is a gross mismanagement of the funds placed into your hands, especially considering the current circumstances we're facing with our schools. Government finances are very complicated. The numbers involved are almost too vast to comprehend. In the 1970s, we had Prop 13 enacted by voters, and its implementation quickly limited the funding for local schools. Sacramento reacted with Prop 98, and so the minimum amount of the state budget has to be spent on schools. We have a $150 billion budget in California, and about 30 to 40% of it is spent on education. Santa Barbara's share of this is $176 million a year. 82% of that is spent on salaries and benefits for staff and teachers and such. That's a giant pools of money, and I contribute my paltry little tax dollars to that. And I think we should spend the money on safe drinking water per Measure I, and instead of buying $4,000 of a trip, why don't we buy a water fountain, and we'll put a plaque with you, Jacqueline Reed, saying, I'm sacrificing and committing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank
to buy just this one fountain for the students.
Thank you. And I was mistaken. We actually have one more speaker on this agenda item, and that's Ms. Sheridan Rosenberg. Speaking to item F1, you also wanted to speak to another consent item. Are you okay with doing it together? Okay. Thank you.
So just to clarify, Fair Education isn't a group of small sort of community members. We're a group of parents. We are your constituents. We have been coming up to this microphone each and every meeting asking the board to stop giving money to nonprofits and to give it to teachers. And I know most of you are busy and haven't been able to attend all of those meetings, but that's what we have been pounding this podium, begging the board to do. Only pay teachers to teach classes, period, and give them more money and fix up the facilities. Which leads me to this, Jackie, you should pay for this yourself. Look, I get that you want to go, but you run a nonprofit that you're the founder, I guess you're the CEO or the head of it, Teaching Fair, which creates curriculum for, I would imagine, equity curriculum, correct? I view that the district paying for you to do this trip, there is no way that you would not be doing business for yourself as well. So therefore, I think it would be unconscionable to give $4,100 to someone to take a vacay to DC that will help promote her own business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is she going to speak to her?
Did you want to speak to item F8 as well? No. Okay. Thank you very much. That concludes public comment for consent agenda items.
Okay, board members, are there other consent items you would like to pull for conversation? Hearing none, do I hear approval of the consent agenda? Do I hear a motion?
Yes, I so move.
Ms. Munoz, do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We will next move to our action agenda, starting with G1. Ms. Capps?
1 second here. Sorry, just need to pull this up. Apologies, it's on my computer and it's not loading. Okay, I'll just do it from here. In the case of 201920-05, we move to, I don't have the actual notes. I believe it was a stipulated agreement. Thank you. It's just not loading on my computer. Thank you. Full expulsion of 2 semesters which end June 2020.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. And in the case of 201920-06, we move to approve the recommendation of full expulsion, which ends, of 1 semester, which ends January 2020.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. And the third one, in the case of 201920-19, move to approve the recommendation of a stipulated agreement, full expulsion for 2 semesters, which ends June 2020.
I abstain on this one.
Okay. Abstention. I second that before we have the extension. So, okay, now calling for a vote. I'll do a roll call. Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Ms. Munoz?
I abstain.
Dr. Reed?
Aye.
Ms. Capps?
Aye.
Sims Moulton, aye. Ms. passes with 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay, next we're moving to item G4. Board members, you do have some wording before you perhaps on this item. If not, I will read the amended motion here. For approval of the CTEFP grant proposal for VADA, please read the motion in this statement is what I will do. Motion to approve the CTEF grant proposal for VADA. The Santa Barbara Unified School District Board of Trustees fully supports the content of the district's Career Technical Education Facilities Program applications for Santa Barbara High School's design, visual, and media arts pathways.
And we do have, President Simpson, we do have about 6 speakers on this item.
Okay.
Would you like to do them first?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So I will call to the podium. First, we'll have Alma Gus, followed by Kirsten Stewart, followed by Jill Rivera. Excellent. Okay, great. Then Kirsten Stewart, excuse me.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Stewart, and I am the parent of a child in the VADA program. And I know throughout the next year, you guys are going to be faced with a lot of decisions about the new building program and the grant and the architect. But I would like you to talk about why I think it's so important that you push this forward and we do it quickly. I suspect that you all know the value of arts education, so I don't feel I need to speak to the choir on this. My goal is to simply urge you to just move forward on this construction and do everything that you can to make this happen. But I also want to tell you why I believe so strongly in this project. My quiet, reserved daughter found her voice this year. And she found her people through VADA, and she found her outlet. And I credit VADA with this transformation for her. It's not just about putting paint on canvas, it's about expression and
30
critical
seconds.
thinking and looking at the world through a different and colorful lens. And I think that VADA has rightly earned its place in this community with among the other more well-known academies. And I would like for you to make this building happen, hopefully in her tenure at Santa Barbara High School. Don't let this project be delayed. Do everything that you can to move this forward so we can see it, not just for my daughter, but maybe for my son who's coming up the pike, and for all the other kids. This is really important for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jill Rivera.
My son was a VADA student, and I can tell you that VADA produces good fruit. And my son was a quiet boy. You know him, Wendy. And I see Daniel over there and Brooke Vandekar, who totally just transformed my son from a very quiet, introverted person who we knew was a really, really good artist. But if it wasn't for the foundational skills that he gained at VADA, he wouldn't be where he is right now, which is he is a technical environmental artist for Sony. And I was on the board. I was board president for VADA. We raised money for the program, and I just saw so many kids that found their way, and my son was one of them because he was more of a visual person. So the classes were structured in a way that he could learn history by explaining his competency through drawing, for instance. But he got all the skill sets met.
30
How am I
seconds.
doing?
Good.
And I just can tell you that that Daniel and all the teachers that I worked with so much over my time there really, really poured into the kids, and they developed relationships with them. And, when I saw him tonight, he was so happy to hear about my son, and we were celebrating together. So please, whatever they need, give it to them.
Thank you. And our final speaker, I believe this is for this item, is Victoria Cutworth. Is that correct, that you wanted to speak to this? Good.
Hello, board. My name is Tori Cutbirth, and I am an extremely enthusiastic supporter of this program and project. I'm a VADA alumni and Santa Barbara native myself. Many of my teachers, principals are in this room tonight, and I absolutely would not be where I am today without their support and the support of VADA. VADA isn't just about art. It is about art and empowering students who love art to follow their dreams and their passions, but it really prepares students to learn how to work with others, and this whole program is so incredibly accessible to all students, no matter what your race, your socioeconomic background. The entire staff is incredible, and this facility would be a game changer for students. Investing in this project and supporting this project is directly supporting the future of our community. I am now the executive director of a local nonprofit serving youth in our community, and I am the direct result of all of the training and support that VADA provided me growing up. I'm a little nervous, but I am so enthusiastic of VADA and everything that they do. They produce so many opportunities for students, and an open door and an opportunity is what can make the difference for the success of our youth to have opportunities for jobs and higher education, and that's exactly what I got with VADA. So I really urge everyone to support this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That concludes public comment on this agenda item. Thanks.
Okay, Mr.
Thanks to the
Matsuoka.
public.
All right, so there are two action items that have been presented in the agenda. The first is the actual CTEP application. And let's see, looking at the board, 3 of you went through this process with the DPEA submittal. And so for Ms. Munoz, Ms. Ford, so this application process, there's money in the pipeline that's available. It is a competitive process. What we also prepared is an MOU that just discusses the financial commitments on the part of the district and Friends of VADA, which we've abbreviated FOV. And so the application is in front of you. It has been completely vetted. I am ready to sign off as your superintendent on all the assurances. And in the back is Daniel Barnett, who's been working on this for, I don't know, 3 years? Quite a while. It's been a labor of love for him. Next to him is Jeff Spear, who is in the Friends of Vada Foundation. They're here to answer any questions you might have about the program. There is a conceptual image of the building. Now, whether it turns out like that is yet to be seen, but it's a beautiful design, as is fitting for a creative artistic space. So the proposal for the grant application is in your agenda, and we'd be glad to respond to any questions.
Board member, any comments or questions? Ms. Capps?
Excuse me, I wanted to lend my support to VADA as well. It's a special place in our family. My nephew was a graduate of there, and so I've been there quite a bit. And also a babysitter of ours was a product of the program, and ended up, she's now pre-med at Cornell. And I just love, I love visiting. I love going to the art shows, seeing the creativity, seeing what's done for my nephew. But it is true, when I've gone there, it doesn't feel as though the space matches the level of creativity that those wonderful students need. So I'm happy to see this going forward and lend my support. Thanks.
Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I would reiterate what Ms. Kapp said and had the opportunity. I would reiterate what Ms. Kapp said and had the opportunity to also go and visit the students, and it was really exciting. They were so passionate. They didn't seem to be concerned as much about the space, but when I walked in there, it was like, whoa, this is not really conducive. But it didn't seem to really bother them, and they were excited to show the work that they were doing. And I think the idea of really linking art to science and the curriculum, because it makes it rich and ties in their own creativity, their own creative juices into the actual content area that sometimes can be challenging. So to find ways to really engage students, not just in the content, but ways to integrate art into that, I think is really exciting. So I totally support it. I think this is an amazing site, and I look forward to seeing it move forward.
Okay. Ms. Munoz?
Yes, I love the excitement and sharing about, how your students have, how your, son, for example, has come forward with VADA, and so I certainly support it and enjoy, and look forward to having this happen as soon as possible.
Ms. Ford?
I agree with all of my colleagues. I think this is a great thing. My life and the lives of so many of my friends and family have been greatly enhanced by the arts, and I believe that environment and beauty makes a difference in the lives of all of us, and so VADA deserves this, and I wholeheartedly support it.
Yes, I do as well. I don't need to reiterate comments, so I am looking forward to seeing this come forth. Any other? Right. So I need a motion.
I move to, I'll go ahead and move to approve the Visual Arts and Design Academy VADA Career Technical Education Facilities Program, CTEFP grant application.
Dr. Reed, you actually read that one. I read that earlier, so.
Motion to approve the CTEFP grant proposal for VADA. The Santa Barbara Unified School District Board of Trustee fully supports the content of the district's Career Technical Education Facilities Program applications for Santa Barbara High School's Design, Visual, and Media Arts pathways.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. The second action, are you going to take that one as well, for voting memorandum?
Yes, so the next item is an MOU between the district and Friends of VADA. It's codifying the financial commitments on both parties. We are very comfortable with their fundraising ability, and notice that we had already earmarked about $1.2 million in Measure I. So we feel that these budget proposals are totally reachable. So if there's any questions on the language or comments, and then it's a board action item.
Any comments or, okay, need a motion?
I move to approve the memorandum of understanding between Santa Barbara Unified School District and Friends of Visual Arts and Design Academy.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Go forth and VADA. All All right, board, we do typically take a break between action and report. Are we ready to keep moving forward, or no, do we need a break? We're good? Let's keep moving. Okay. All right, so we next move to the superintendent search process. And we do
President
have a-
Spilett, we have
okay.
two requests for public comment on this agenda item. So we have Mr. John Morse and Mr. James Fechner.
Okay, one
A few more. One more. I need a name. One.
Good evening. I'm John Morse. I'm a member of Fair Education Santa Barbara. And on behalf of the Santa Barbara organization, we support the board's decision to move forward promptly to secure a search firm to locate a replacement superintendent. But I'm here to suggest that the board not retain Hazard, Young, and Attia for that purpose. On the website, there's a link to a list of search firms to get a request for proposal, listing 5 search firms, not in alphabetical order, and Hazard, Young, Attia is at the top of the list. But if you Google Glendale Superintendent Search, you will see that the Glendale Board retained Hazard, Young, Attia to conduct a search. And then the president of the Glendale Teachers Association came forward at a school board meeting requesting that the board dump Hazard, Young, Attia, and at the very least remove Dave Cash and Rudy Castrita from the search team. And that request was granted. Now, it's very unusual to have somebody voice an opinion or a request to remove specific individuals from the search team. And it's obvious that the union was not happy with these 2 people. And I would suggest that you conduct further investigation
30
if you
seconds.
intend to retain Hazard, Young, Mattia in place of one of the other qualified candidates.
Thank you. Mr. James Fechner, and then the third request to speak is a no-name person, so that person, Jill Rivera. I'll write that down.
Thank you. I'm not sure if everyone has seen this copy of the Indy. You've all seen it? I hope so.
Mr.
Just remember
Fechner,
to-
please,
yeah,
Oh,
please
I'm
address
sorry.
the board.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
We're
Have
right
you
here.
seen this one?
Yes.
The Principal Kilgore, her staff, teachers, and especially the Golden Girls should be congratulated and encouraged and replicated. Because I think the concept of equity defined by educational proficiency is something that a lot of people can rally around. There's a couple quotes from the article that are worth repeating, and I quote, "Rather than relying on funding from the district, Kilgore has taken an entrepreneurial approach to helping her students." Now, if I'm to pull away the veneer of diplomacy, it sounds like Franklin's success might have been in spite of, rather than because of, the district administration.
30 seconds.
The demographics didn't change at Franklin, but the educational proficiency did. Could it be that demographics are not destiny, and that on the ground, fearless leadership matters more? Thank you.
Our final speaker, Jill Rivera.
This is my last time for the night, I promise. I've been following closely the Santa Barbara City College search for their new person to lead the school, and from what I hear about him, he's fantastic. And just a really, we're so blessed to have him here. And I just wanted to ask the board if we could, in the spirit of transparency, invite the public in more to that process when we're selecting a new superintendent, and also to consider more than one firm and have the process public, much like was done in the Santa Barbara City College case. I know they had to have people call in to conference in, but it was transparent, and there was more than one firm that they interviewed, and it was public, it was transparent, and I think that made for a really terrific transition, and people
30
felt like
seconds.
they were a part of the transition, a part of the process, and their views and values were respected. And I'm just asking that we do the same here. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment for this agenda item.
Thank you. So, Board, you have before you the report with regards to this very important decision that this board has to undertake with regards to our next superintendent in this search. It's important that we understand the phases of this process in which we're going to take it in terms of those pieces. As Mr. Matsuoka announced his retirement on October 29th, thus our search for a next superintendent began. And so that takes certain phases to make sure that that is happening. We also said that we're going to be taking a very rigorous and good level of responsibility. We do not take this responsibility lightly with regards to that. It's important to, as we do that, as we set our next, our process for our next superintendent. So I also want to make sure that where we are in this process is to, again, to look at our request for proposal. I'll take your comments in just a second with regards to any edits that you may have with regards to the request for proposal. We want to be able to look at that and to be able to send that out to firms who have solicited us, and then also the ones that are listed on here, and they are not listed in any particular order versus priority. They're just by firms that have come forth. And again, as I said, if you have additional firms that you would like for us to look at or to send out a request for proposal, we will do so. And as a board also, so we'll be working with Sandra, the board, we will be looking at this request for proposal that will be going out to those firms that have requested a request for proposal. So tonight's process is to review this request for proposal. Do you have any questions? Are there edits? Or are there different things that need to happen before we take that next step? So that the first phase is to look at the request for proposal and have your comments on that. Any comment, Ms. Capps?
Thank you. I appreciate this. I appreciate the public comment about Santa Barbara City College's process, because I too also heard good things about it, and what I read seems robust. So I don't have any changes to the RFP. I think the time frame that you laid out is a good one, and it's good to communicate that here and now. And just to reiterate, I think we all fully understand that this is the most important role that this board will play, is to choose the next superintendent. So we want to make sure that a process right from the beginning, as it seems to be starting, is as robust and transparent and involving as many people as possible. So I appreciate the start that we have begun. Thanks.
Dr. Reed?
I just would like to thank you also for this proposal, and also acknowledge the idea and the importance of this choosing of the next superintendent, and the transparency of which I think we need to bring this process forward in terms of having, there be no hidden agendas, no questions, but that everyone understands the process as it unfolds, so that you're a part of that process. And should there be questions, that you could have an opportunity to ask those questions that are important. So I think the timeline makes sense, and it's my understanding, Ms. Sims-Moten, that if we follow this timeline, that we should be in good stead in terms of choosing the next superintendent in a timely manner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Ms. Munoz? No comment? You do? Okay.
I agree with Dr. Reed in terms of the transparency of the process and having input from the community. And I think also the timeline is good, because I want to make sure that we allow enough time to choose the best superintendent for our school district.
Okay. Thank you. And so I would conclude with thank you for your comments, and certainly with Sandra and I will work together to make sure that we get this out according to our timeline here. And this is also a leadership priority for this board as well, in terms of the phase of how we want to make sure that the board is leading this process in a way. I feel over the last year and a half that we have been under tremendous pressure sometimes, and it feels like we've lost our leadership voice in decisions that we have to make. And so I think this is a good opportunity for us to really lead this from the perspective of a board to ensure that we are doing the right things at the right time. And when it's appropriate, we will make sure that the public voice, all the stakeholders' voice, have an opportunity to have input for this, because this is a community school, this is a public school, so we will be sure that that happens. But we're going to take it face by face, and the board will lead this action. So I appreciate that. So with no further comments and or discussion on that, we will move to our next item. And that is discussion of the 5 new secondary course requests. Ms. Carey.
Thank you, President Sims-Moten, and good evening, Board. I'm bringing before you 5 courses for your approval. I don't think I'll need all the time, but I'm certainly here to answer your questions as I'm best able. The first one I mentioned to you at our last board meeting that I anticipated we would likely be bringing you, but we were still finalizing it, and that is, it's aspirational at this point, and that is bringing to you a science class that we hope to be able to teach in the target language of Spanish as we launch and implement our dual language immersion program at Santa Barbara Junior High School. So that is course number 1. The next 3 courses are components of our International Baccalaureate program at Dos Pueblos High School. Students who pursue an International Baccalaureate diploma must complete coursework in 6 subject areas, and 3 of those must be done at what they call a higher level, or in a articulated 2-course sequence. And in some of the descriptions in the accompanying materials, you can see some of the articulation in the math courses. The 5th one is AP Music Theory. So it's really great to be able to offer advanced placement courses in our electives, and oftentimes these are offered in co-seated ways. We don't normally have a full section's worth of things like AP Music Theory, but we might. But it's really great to be able to expand our college level course offerings to students who are still in high school beyond just what we consider sort of the traditional subject areas. So these are the 5 courses I'm bringing. There are summary descriptions and, of course, long form pieces of information about them, but I'm here to answer your questions if you have them.
Board, any comments or questions? I think we've got our questions
Okay,
answered.
so we'll bring these back
We'll
then
bring
on
these
the consent agenda for next round.
Is that good?
Great,
Okay,
and then
yes.
they'll make it just in time for our course catalog. So thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Carey. So next, we'll move to item H3, Demographic and Income Report for Santa Barbara Unified School District in context of Santa Barbara. Mr. Matsuoka.
And Mr. Rouse, if you'll cue up a slide deck. So tomorrow morning, I'm delivering a State of School speech, and with the wonderful support of Ms. Barnwell and Mr. Rouse, they helped me get some of these, I'll call them infographics built. Watching a computer scientist build slides is fascinating. We say, hey, Brian, can you make this happen? And poof, it happens. So this slide deck is a preview of tomorrow. We will upload it to Novus so that it's part of the agenda tonight. This sort of the narrative which the board had in the board packet, I mean, it's not necessarily new information, but I find that as I present Santa Barbara Unified to our community, people look at the data and go, huh, didn't know that. In fact, when I applied for superintendent 4 years ago, I didn't know Santa Barbara was 60% Latino, and all of the different aspects that make up our school district. And so I've been working on this for about 2 months, and it's going to be embedded in State of Schools, because as we think about the future for our district, it's really important that everybody understands the context. Is it plugged in? Okay. All right. He'll just do it by. All right. Ethnicity by grade span. So you see the 4, or actually 3 spans: elementary, junior high, and then high school. And very simply stated, blue and the blue is the Latino population, white is the orange, and other is the goldenrod. And you can see the progression. Our elementary schools, our 9 elementary schools are 75% Latino. And our west side and east side is, it's a reflection of that. Our junior high in total is about 57% roughly. Our high schools are getting closer to 50-50. But the aggregate of our school district, we are a Latino-dominant school district. We are 60% Latino. So that's the community that we serve. Next slide. I zoomed in on the elementary schools because here's our 9 elementary schools. And you can see within some of our schools how dominant our Latino population. Our littlest one, Santa Barbara Community Academy, is, I believe, 98% Latino. We have our 7 Title I schools that collectively average 93% Latino. And those are the elementary students that we serve in our district. Next slide. So we have captured our English language learner data with this concept called EverEL. So there's initial fluent, reclassified fluent, there's different categories of fluency. We have captured that as if a student was ever an English language learner, we've built this data point. Another way to state it is for these students, their first language was a language other than English at home. And so as you look at our schools, our elementary schools, I believe that number is 58% of our elementary students at some point in their life have learned English as a second language, and you can see across our secondary schools. And our partner districts, which you're going to see pop into the data, you can see the comparison. Cold Spring and Montecito have different populations. It's interesting, Goleta has a pretty high EL population. They have different pockets of their school district that have a high EL percentage. And Hope, Hope serves that middle part of Santa Barbara, and there are sections there where they have also English language learners. Next slide. All right, before we get to the next one about socioeconomically disadvantaged students, this is just a visual about the conditions that lead to a student being identified as socioeconomically disadvantaged. And the reason why we put those lists of words, it is not just low income. All right, it is one of them. Where's the one? One or more parent does not have a high school diploma, leads to that designation. Foster youth, migrant students, which we don't have hardly any today, low income. And then homelessness, and I will continue to quote the statistic, Santa Barbara County has the highest rate of homelessness of the 58 counties in the state. The highest. I mean, LA County, which you think has a huge homeless population, but it also has a huge population. I looked it up today. I think they're 4% homeless in LA County. We have the highest rate of homelessness. It's the conditions of challenged housing, low income. It's just, we all know Santa Barbara is an expensive place, but I would say North County also has its challenges. And our homeless population in our district is 14.3%. 1 out of 7 of our students are dealing with a distressed housing environment. Now, that doesn't mean they're sleeping in a car, but it does mean that they are 3 families in an apartment, dealing with very difficult circumstances. And so out of all those conditions, the next slide shows our socioeconomically disadvantaged data. Our elementary schools are at 66% SED. And then you can see our secondary schools, it's a little under 50%. District-wide, we are at 58% of our students are socioeconomically disadvantaged. Now, I'm just going to pause, and I just want that to settle with us, that 2 out of 3 of our elementary students have one of those challenging life circumstances that we are working hard to overcome. 2 out of 3, and that is not easy to do. And then you can see our comparable districts, Cold Spring, Montecito, Hope, and Goleta. Next slide. All right, this is a pretty stunning statistic because we live in the shadow of the district with the highest income per student, which is Montecito Union. The other district that I know of up in the Bay Area is Hillsborough, which is, sort of just below San Francisco. They're up in the $30,000 range. So this is data from, 2017-18. This is the income per student that we receive as a district. And I put us in the middle, well, we're towards the right, and that is $12,747. And I think we're $30 above the state average. $30 above the state average. And the average in California is not a good number. I mean, there's a lot of research that says what should a district receive in order to educate students well. I would say it's probably in the $16,000 to $18,000 range in today's dollars. For those of you that have lived on the East Coast and experienced other places, it's become very typical that the East Coast states are funding at about the $20,000 plus per range. Now, you look at our comparables. So Hope is, I put the partner districts in green. Hope's almost at our level of funding. I will comment that the cost of running junior highs and high schools is much higher than elementary schools. High schools are really complex places. Now, those districts to the left of us have more money per student, and you wouldn't expect that, like Oxnard Union High School District, Santa Maria Union High School District. I was surprised to learn Carpinteria, I forget what the number in the narrative, but it's like $1,500 more per student than we get. Goleta is where I just had, I would say, an aha moment, because they get, I think it's $1,800 more per student. And when I toured their schools about 2 months ago, I could feel the difference that $1,800 per student makes in the context of elementary schools. I mean, it just felt good. And I went back, I'll say home to our schools, and I just was wandering around thinking, oh, what I would give to have Goleta's numbers. Because here's what it would translate. If we got Goleta's income per kid, it's $27 million more. Oh my goodness, what could we do with $27 million more? I think there's a perception that we're like Santa Monica, Malibu. You know, we're Santa Barbara. Aren't we like Santa Monica, Malibu? Their income per student is just so much higher than ours. If we got their same amount of money, it's $48 million more. And because we have a good friend and colleague in Dr. Ben Drotti, some of us stay in touch with him, and we hear about his challenges, but we also hear about the environment in which he's landed. He has tremendous resources in that district. And then you can see our two small partner districts, Cold Spring and Montecito. For those of you that don't understand the funding model, so we get $12,500, and by the way, we have just moved into what's called basic aid status, or local property tax. And so you could think of Montecito and Cold Spring as their base funding is $12,500. But if your property taxes exceed that, you get to keep the excess property taxes. And so what's happened since basic aid legislation happened in 1982, we didn't know it was going to create these kinds of funded systems. They're mostly coastal districts, high wealth. Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, has a lot of basic aid districts. Montecito is up in, what, $37,000 per student territory. I think that's the last slide. Is that right? Mr. Rouse? Yes. So why this data? As our community asks us questions, how we spend our money, results, all the outcomes that we've heard over the last 6 months, I want everybody to understand the context in which we work and serve. Because when I'm out in the community, like I shared an element of this with a Rotary Club, and I unveiled it slide by slide, and you could see that, like, what do you mean we're average in terms of income? The perception of us as a high wealth setting means that we're a high wealth district. We are right at the state average. And so I'm proud of the work that we do. We have hardworking staffs, teachers. We're making do with the state average, educating a population that looks more like some of our urban districts, looks like districts in North County. And so I present that as information. I'm going to present this tomorrow to our State of Schools audience, just so that people understand our context. Questions, comments?
Questions, comments, board? Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know I appreciated it all in one document, all of this information laid out, and I know Brian was helpful in that as well. But it really gave perspective, like you said, and really provided a deeper analysis of our schools, and I appreciated how it was divided up. I did have a question in terms of the other. So we still have this other piece in the chart in terms of ethnicity. And so I'm wondering what is other?
The largest subgroup there is going to be Asian out of the other, but the other is small. African American, Asian Indian. We didn't break it down because the slices would have gotten really small. So other is predominantly Asian, African American, Asian Indian, probably some Middle East.
Because you do have African American and Asian separated out, and Filipino.
On your sheet, your demographic sheet.
Oh, in the data, yes, I did break it down in the narrative, but for the sake of the slides, it just would have gotten really tiny to list some of those.
Yeah, that's been one of my comments too. So is it possible to do an asterisk there? I understand the slices, but can you maybe just add those if you're not going to have them together?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Board?
I was just going to say that I do think this is important. But I will say that I think people in Santa Barbara, and especially all of the teachers and parents and everyone who goes to our schools, actually do know what this community looks like. And for me, the biggest question then is, if we say that that we have lots of students who need extra help and assistance and support in language, and lots of students who experience poverty and other traumatic home circumstances, then the next, I guess I'd say the next action is to take the data and make sure that we're using all of our funding to address those particular two items.
Is that a question or a comment?
It's, well, it seems like this is part one, because for me, data doesn't mean anything until I then take the data and I make some decisions. So I think it's incumbent on all of us here to now take this data and say, yes, these kids need support, they need help, and are we doing everything that we can so that they can be successful? I want the answer to be yes. It's a comment.
Yeah, I think my response to that, I appreciate the way you framed it. But what it means is, are we going to make a financial priority around the highest need students, which is our English language learners, students who are overcoming poverty, and I would love for us to make that budget priority part of the process every year.
Well, the state does with the LCAP funding. So I think we just reflect that in the way that we allocate all the funds that we get from LCAP, and listening very carefully to our community about their needs and their thoughts about it. And I guess I would say the next thing that I'm very interested in is finding out what our process is, since I'm new to the board, for engaging the community in the LCAP plan and the LCAP stakeholder feedback.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, just a comment. Thank you for this data. It's really interesting, and I agree. I think that it's fairly well, it's always good to see the data. And I focus less on sort of the disparity with other schools, which have a lot more money per pupil. I think it's important to know it's a good context, but I'm curious about those who are like Ventura, I think it was Ventura and Hope, who are right around us, and Santa Maria. You know, it is a reality how much money we get per pupil. We can't change that. So rather than sort of, I mean, it's important to understand the challenges, but once you've understood them, I think it's then incumbent to say, let's pick out some good schools, really high achieving schools within those other comparable districts potentially, and find out sort of, again, it's a common suggestion I make, and it's just a suggestion, but to find out sort of what successes are happening there. I really appreciated the showcase of Franklin on the cover of The Independent, and that quote unquote entrepreneurial spirit of the principal there. I know that's happening in all of our schools, but that's where I go with this kind of information, is to sort of focus on who are other school districts with the same exact financial challenges as we have, and what can we learn from them. Thanks.
Okay. Additional comments? Good. Mr. Matsuoka?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, I think this is also you, Mr. Matsuoka, budget transitions in California and SBUSD.
At the next board meeting, which is, by the way, Monday, December 16th, and we had to switch it because of the change in rules about organization meeting and such. Is this working? Okay. So as we thought about some of the important decisions, recommendations that are going to come to you during first interim. Now, first interim is your first review of the budget since you adopted it last June. There's going to be some good news there. And there's just new financial info now that we're like 4 months into the budget year. Well, 5 months. All right, so we just want the board to understand 4 big picture things. We have a new governor. We also have this constant handoff of donor-inspired projects to district-owned programs. And I know you're aware of it, but I just want to remind the board and us, our staff, that we have that ongoing responsibility. There's future programs to plan for, and we have ongoing needs. Okay, so first, a new governor. So Jerry Brown, he was governor when I started my career 40 years ago. And he almost made governor at the end of my career. It's pretty amazing. The young version of Jerry Brown was, he was a maverick. He was very opinionated. I think he learned a lot, though, from his first stint as governor. Watching him pull public ed out of the edge of, I'll call it, budget calamity was honestly a miracle. I mean, he single-handedly, I think, helped our state economy and public ed just get through a rough patch. He was very fond of one-time funds, and it was from his sort of fiscal conservancy. He did not want to put money into the budget for ongoing expenses. So he became really good at using one-time funds, sometimes large amounts, but he would grant it, and then we had to plan accordingly, not use it for ongoing staffing expenses. But he did that for so long, for 5 years, that we all got used to, couldn't totally depend on it, but got used to, okay, here comes one-time money that would solve your budget issue for another year. When Gavin Newsom came into the picture, my observations, he does not use one-time funds as explicitly, although every budget is a reflection of the core values of that leader. And Gavin Newsom's heart has been more in special ed, and he's granted one-time funds in special ed. So Gavin has a different fiscal framework. I would say my comments about his leadership right now, I'm good with it. I think he's going to face some challenges with a whole different set around utility companies and the power and all of that. We've been waiting for a recession now for 8 years. It's just been such a long uprise in the economy. I think we all wonder how the state will fare in a recession. Right now, I don't see any signs of it coming. Now, I may have just jinxed the entire state, but I don't have that much power. But let me be clear. I mean, Gavin Newsom right now, I think he's treating us well. The state budget has been healthy for ed, but he just has a different budgeting style. And so we have to adjust for that. We are now spending down the last of the one-time monies from the Jerry Brown era. And staff has been planning for that for 3 years, for 2 years, but we're now in the last year of some of that. So some of the recommendations that we're going to bring to you during the budget planning season, which honestly begins at first interim, because we have to start planning for next year. You're going to see, okay, we recommend solving this funding for one-time funding in the past. We now recommend either we've got to reduce that expense or we got to find a different funding source. Okay, so just background that we have a new governor. Next slide. So we have great donors, great foundations in town that help us get started with some just small to medium to large projects. But as I meet with the leaders of foundations, they are very clear. We're not going to fund this forever. And at some point, you've got to take over the funding. Peak is a really good example. John Clark and the Bauer Foundation, Santa Barbara Foundation, many people have made Peak happen over the last, I want to say, 8 years, roughly 8 years. But my first year, I think, when I met with some of these leaders, they said, okay, we are now asking the district to, over time, take over the funding, and we have been absorbing that. And that process is continuing for Peak. I mentioned it into the board narrative when the parcel tax sunsetted. This was my first year. It's like, what's the plan? And we had to scramble a bit so that all of that art, music support continued. What's on the future? Certainly the Dyslexia Project is growing in strength and commitment by the Ed Foundation. But we have ongoing conversations with their board saying, what's the succession planning for budget? Mental health, did I put a number in the narrative? Was it in there? Okay, Fran was gone when that narrative went to print, so she may dispute the, yeah, she said it's not quite, it's not 2 million.
Close to 1 million is our nut in the game, but it's a 2 million overall.
Right, okay, so it's a $2 million program where 50% of it is being funded by outside support, which is, we needed that to get this program off the ground. And these are ongoing conversations every year about, with our donors, can you continue your support? But someday, we're going to have to hold that cost. All right, so we have future efforts in motion. We have the comprehensive plan for multilingual pathways. Dual language immersion is coming to Santa Barbara Junior High next year. And so those are great programs, but they take money to make them happen. The Ethnic Studies course, which has been in production now for, you could say, 6 years, but we've got a lot of work to get this on the ground starting next year. MTSS, we've mentioned, is the parallel structure of academic support and mental health support. We're not sure what money that's going to take, but eventually we need to have resources ready. And the last slide here is, and I just included a short list. I mean, every year we have staff, superintendent, executive cabinet. There are many things that we wish we could fund. The sustainability position has been requested by the board. Special ed staff is always an ongoing request. Last spring we did add school psychologists in the elementary layer, and it's made a big difference. I see John Shetler nodding his head in the back. To have a full-time school psychologist at every elementary school covers their needs, and they're starting to add just some general counseling support. Reducing class size. I'm looking at our teachers. There are a few who are still here, absolutely. And then the 7th period option for our secondary students, which the board heard very clearly at the last study session. So there's all these things that we want as a school district. So preamble for not only first interim, next board meeting, but as we get into the budget planning cycle for the spring, these are all considerations. I would say the most important thing for the board to be aware of is these one-time funds that are sunsetting. We have to find some answers for how to fund those. And some of the lists in the narrative is professional development for staff. That's, to us, been a really big one. And by the way, we commented in cabinet Some of the new money that's coming in this year, we are going to recommend that that be used to fund the technology program for next year. I mean, we were wondering how we were going to solve that. We believe we have an answer for you next board meeting. And so I believe that's it. Questions and comments?
Board questions, comments? Hearing none. Looking forward to that first interim conversation.
I'm sure Mr. Che can't wait.
Yeah. Okay, next we'll move to our special education board report.
Excuse me, but we have one speaker on this
Okay.
item, so.
On 5?
Yes,
Okay.
H5. We have Patty Moore has requested to speak public comment on this agenda item. Okay. Thanks.
You can do 3.
You know, you're welcome to do 3.
Really?
Sure.
Well, thanks.
We have one speaker on this agenda item. Go for it.
I can, thank you. Patty Moore, former student, former parent, and current grandparent. Manager also at the Children, Family, and Advocacy Program at Alpha Resource Center. Been there for almost 30 years. As a longtime advocate of inclusion, I'd like to reference an old cartoon that shows someone clearing the school steps of snow while children look on. One of the students is using a wheelchair and kindly asks, "Would you please shovel the ramp?" The person clearing the steps replies, "All these kids are waiting to get up at the stairs. When I get done shoveling them, I will then clear the path for you." The student in the wheelchair replies, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." The caption is clear. Clearing a path for children, for people with special needs, clears a path for everyone. 3 years ago, Superintendent Matsuoka reached out to me to talk about my impressions of how special ed services were running in the district. Our meeting was scheduled for 45 minutes, and it lasted almost 3 hours. Nobody really had listened to me that long, and certainly no superintendent in the 35 years I've been working in special education as a parent and as a professional. He listened, and after this, we met together with small groups of parents of students receiving special ed support services, and again, he listened to them. By our second meeting, the superintendent remarked, "Patty, we don't have a special ed problem. We've got a general ed problem." If our first meeting together had not left me convinced, then by the second one, I was sure there was hope for this district. While problems may still seem unsurmountable, I've been encouraged by the leadership built in the change in culture and the district's response to parental concerns. And let's face it, when the parents are calling our office, usually they're frustrated, they're angry, and they're overwhelmed. Now, when our staff reaches out to the district to help on behalf of the parents we work with, the response is quick and the response is honest. And while excuses could easily be made, they are not being made any longer. The leadership team under the superintendent's direction is clearing a new path for all students. There is ownership and there is action. The literacy project is proving results and early intervention works. Research is showing that predictors of learning challenges and dyslexia are present and can be identified even before children enter kindergarten. When we address disproportionate numbers, the superintendent was correct. It is not a special ed problem. It's the system as a whole.
30 seconds.
His vision, leadership, and courage to take on the challenges provided hope for some of us who have been seeking system change within this district for decades. I look to the board to keep this momentum going for the sake of all our students, their educators, families, and our entire community. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Shetler.
Good evening. It's good to be back a little bit earlier this time. So some of what I'm going to be presenting today is in response to some of the questions that you all provided, and I'm going to start by going over some of the demographic information. I didn't plan to coordinate this with the previous presentation, but you'll see there's a lot of overlap. I want first just to paint a picture of what all students look like in Santa Barbara Unified, not just students with disabilities, so that we can make some comparisons. So the first thing I would point out is that we currently have 13% of the school district receiving special education through an IEP. and that equates to just under 1,800 students. This slide is showing those same subgroups. And if you look at the far right column, the parenthetical represents our all students number from the previous slide. And the number to the left of that represents that same percentage of students from within the special education subgroup. And so you'll notice there are pretty significant discrepancies across every category. That students with disabilities are overrepresented in our Latinx population, in our EL population, and in our socioeconomically disadvantaged population. And we're currently working with CDE around disproportionality for students with specific learning disabilities who are, under their categorization, Hispanic. And part of that work is to try and identify root causes that might lead to our over-identification issue. But I would just offer this. Most of our referrals for special education evaluations come from one of two places. They either come from families who are looking for answers, or they come from school teams, teachers, administrators who are trying to figure out why a student's not learning. And so I would offer that I think in many cases we're searching for answers, and we find ourselves going down the path of, well, maybe it's a disability that explains why the student is not learning. The data tells us it's probably something else in a lot of those cases. And so as we talk about building up more proactive supports in general ed, this data sort of underscores why that's important. Many of these students should be able to get help without getting a label of having a disability, and that's a place where we're working to do better. The work around MTSS, the work around additional school psychologists, the work around the literacy project, all aims to get at that set of issues. And the other side of the coin, we talk about our child find obligation. So quick definition of child find, we have to actively identify, locate, and evaluate students with disabilities who may require special education. And we've talked at length in open and closed session about trying to prevent students from falling through the cracks. So on the one hand, we're over-identifying students. On the other hand, we want to make sure we don't miss those that do need help. Part of the way we sometimes miss students is I think we tend to overemphasize students' academic outcomes as proof that they're doing okay. We see that in secondary schools. I think we overestimate what grades communicate about students, sometimes at the expense of social emotional things or behavior things that could be red flags for real issues that students are grappling with. This year there are a few things that we've been working on to try and improve our child find practices around the district. The first was to bring in some legal counsel, a special education attorney who did training for all of our school site administrators, for our school psychologists, and for our counselors to help them understand child find, what to look for, how to refer a student. Separate from that, Dr. Wagenik is working with some schools to do a major revamp of their SST process, which is oftentimes the first formal way that a group of educators are getting together with a parent to talk about student concerns that may lead to, at the end of that, an assessment for special education. And I'll let Dr. Wagenik address any more specific questions you might have at the end on that work. And related to that, we're trying to be more objective with how we identify students who are struggling. So instead of it just being a teacher referral or a parent referral, we have a lot of data in our student information system, and we now have the ability in Aries to create our own early warning system, so we can decide what we want to be sort of searched for through Aries that would flag students that maybe we otherwise are not thinking about, so that it does become a little bit more objective. And the last point I would make about our child find obligation is that we always have to remember that the bar for us to suspect that a student may have a disability is lower than that bar that they would have to cross in order to access special education and be deemed eligible. So we do evaluate more students than end up in our system, and that's the way it's supposed to be designed. I want to talk a little bit about the academic achievement. When we look at CASP score results for students with disabilities, they are absolutely not where we want them to be, but I want to make sure we understand that in many cases, the way students are qualifying for special education in the first place is that they're scoring low academically, right? So that in many cases comes with having an IEP. It's also part of the reason why the state has set its own targets for students with disabilities, which are reflected there in the second and third bullets. the statewide target for the students with disabilities subgroup on the ELA portion of the CASP is that almost 15% will be at a 3 or above. And you can see we're not there yet, and we're not there for the math, and the math target is 12.6. So we're currently working with CDE, again, root cause analysis to try and identify what are the factors that contribute to that so that we can get our students to hit those benchmarks. On a positive note, we have our early results back from the 2019 CASP. I don't yet know whether we met our targets yet. They haven't released that specific data, but we did see a lot of good growth, especially in 8 of our 9 elementary schools, math growth in 7 of the 9. The secondary growth is definitely mixed. I shared in the narrative a little bit of color-coded data that you can look at to kind of see where those scores are going. And so I'm waiting to see what our targets look like for this next round. The way that we are working toward improving our literacy, we talked at the last meeting about the Project Read, the Orton Gillingham training and materials that we now have 25 of our 100 special ed teachers trained on, and they have those materials in their classrooms. The one school that we don't yet have somebody trained is La Colina, but in every other school we have those. And really the intention is, like we talked about last time, the earlier we can get those interventions going for kids, the better. And when we can do those things before they even get to special ed, that's the ideal. We also have some other supplemental learning tools like Fast Forward, which helps students to discriminate between sounds. It can slow down sounds electronically, which can help with some of their reading development. And we did talk a little bit about Learning Ally at the last board meeting. That tool, it's an app that goes on students' iPads that will provide a real human voice for text that they can access in their classroom and books that they want to have access to. The narrative, I included some data from last year just about our usage. I think we had something like 331,000 pages read by students. It was quite an impressive number in terms of our usage, so we're happy with that. I wanted to talk a little bit about our inclusive practices. On that same sort of report that we get from the state where we look at our targets for our academic achievement, we're also scored on whether or not we're meeting our least restrictive environment targets. And I'm happy to say that for several years now, Santa Barbara Unified has been meeting those targets, meaning that we have a good percentage of students with IEPs spending 80% or more of their day in general ed settings. That's not to say that that work is easy, far from it. We've been working on versions of CoLab or co-teaching at all of our secondary sites for several years now. That work is complex. It is very different than what a lot of teachers experience in prep programs. And we're very much improving every year and trying to figure out the right way to set up structures to support those teachers with common prep time, with limiting the number of sections that they're co-teaching. But it is absolutely challenging work. And I, just for the purposes of the board understanding, when we talk about co-teaching, we're really looking at those 3 elements, the planning, the instruction, and the assessment. And if we're doing all 3 of those in a very structured way, we would refer to that as co-teaching. But there are many places around the district where we're doing a version of that, a scaled back version of that, where maybe you have a gen ed teacher and a special ed teacher co-instructing, but maybe they have not done a lot of planning together on the front end, or maybe they're not doing co-assessment of the student work together. And lastly, I didn't prepare a slide for this, but there was a question from Ms. Ford about paraeducator pay. And so with the help of Brian Tanguay in HR, we pulled some comps from some of the local districts that we think we might be competing for with staff. I don't want to draw too many conclusions from that of my own, but I'll say we're sort of in the middle of the pack when we look at compensation for paraeducators. And the way that we looked at those pay scales as we looked at step 1, step 3, and step 6 for each of those. And so with that, I welcome any questions or comments from the board.
Questions or comments from the board? Ms. Ford?
Thanks. Dr. Wagner, I think that the key is in the SST process. So maybe you could tell us about the revamp.
I'd be happy to. Tempted to get Ms. Scharfeld up here because she is one of the schools that's piloting, but it has been, I know it sounds odd, but a dream of mine to overhaul the SST process since I was a school counselor. And with MTSS and the movement and the things we're doing in the district and having the right leaders in place to do it, we started piloting. I was at the MTSS conference, and it all sort of, it was one of those moments, it all sort of started to fall into place. And what it really came down to was to take SST and turn it into a cycle of inquiry process for each individual student. So it's really case management of students. And so I reached out to some principals, and we right now have Dos Pueblos piloting with 9th grade, Santa Barbara High piloting with 9th grade, though Dr. Simmons wants to do all grades. And I said, let's just pilot, let's hold on for a little bit. Ms. Scharfeld is doing all grades. So her grade teams are working together. And then, did I say Lockeline is 7th grade? So we have those schools just piloting to see how it goes. Other schools are eager to do it, but really without diving in too much. It is personalizing the cycle of inquiry to each student and digging in. The other piece that's important to this was what John mentioned, and that's with the help of Mr. Rouse and the ETS team building a early warning system through ARIES. And so we have the secondary ready to go. The elementary is going to be built. But really, rather than going with, it's data informed, rather than going with our gut and feeling like these are the students who should be SST'd, we actually get a listing of the top 200 students in each school ranked from most needy to least. And those are on behavioral and academic indicators. Thank you.
Ms. Capps?
I just think maybe for the sake of anybody watching or curious, just to reiterate that SST means Student Success Team.
Yes, or student study team, either way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Additional
Yes, thank you. I just was, if you could kind of do 30,000 foot level and speak to the challenges, one or two challenges that you really see, because it is a nice opportunity to have this conversation.
Yeah, that's pretty wide open. I think the challenge for all of us is that we're constantly trying to improve systems that were built so long ago and are so antiquated, and it just feels like we're trying to retrofit an old house all the time instead of just tearing it down. In special ed, so much of what we do, it's bound by the law, so we don't have a lot of innovation room. We just kind of have to do what we're required to do. Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge.
That's really interesting. I appreciate how you said that. One of the complaints or concerns that we often hear from special ed parents is the staff turnover, and it's something we've talked about. But if you could speak to that challenge specifically, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. We have our normal factors. It's an expensive place to live. We get a lot of new grads from our local programs, and then we see they get to a stage in life where if they want to purchase a home, oftentimes they'll move out of the area. But on top of that, it's really difficult work, and a lot of the work is there can be a lot of conflict in our work. We try to minimize that, but there's a lot at stake, and when people are concerned about their kids, passions run really high. So we try to buffer that. We try to have our office support staff, and like we've talked about before, just working with families when things break down. But it's hard, it's exhausting. It's not unique to Santa Barbara that we start to see teachers leaving the profession. It's not unique to Santa Barbara that we have a teacher shortage. In some ways, I think we've been able to hang on longer than most places, but we're starting to see it's just harder and harder to find enough people to do the work. Yeah.
Thank you, and I certainly have deep admiration for that kind of work. So thank you.
Ms. Ford?
If I could just ask you to give a little bit more detail about the concerns that the CDE has in particular and how we're responding to that.
Yeah. So on the just proportionality front, they run their own what they call risk ratios. So they look at certain subgroups and they say if statistically you are way more likely to be found eligible for special education just by being in this subgroup, then you're identified for disproportionality in that area. So for us, it's specific learning disabilities for Hispanic is the term that they use. And the process for disproportionality review, there are two pieces to that. One of them is looking at our policies and procedures, ARs, board policies, to see that we have the right protections in place for families. That tends to not be what I'm seeing as there being any issues there. Then the other compliance review is looking at a student level. So they randomly select students, and we go into the students' files and look for evidence that assessments were administered in unbiased ways, that just certain boxes were checked along the way in the process in order to find that we are compliant or not. And we're just in that process. We submitted everything to them, so I don't know what those next steps would look like if they have any non-compliant findings. And then on the academic side, they have us do our own root cause analysis to look for reasons behind the low achievement for the ELA and math, and then submit a plan to them with kind of an annual review cycle for how we're going to work to address those concerns. Yeah.
Additional comments? Good. Thank you, Mr. Shetler.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Oh, there's a
Late breaking, we have a request to speak for our next agenda item.
okay.
And before we move on to that, Mr. Rouse, why don't you give me the screen since I've got the last report. Let's see, we're boardroom. All right, so in appreciation for what Ms. Moore shared, I don't remember that first meeting going 3 hours, but it was 3 years ago. There were many conversations that led to this board report in January 2017. And 3 of you had just come on the board, 2 of you were not here yet. I just wanted to show this for us to appreciate the progress that we have made with the over-identification of language learners as special ed students. When I saw this data, I was appalled. And I went public with it fast. 6 months into my time, I said, we have a problem with first instruction. And our first instruction solution was special education. So that data point of the percent of ELs in SPED was 51%. It finally dropped to 45. And then tonight, the number, 32%. So board, that is significant progress. Yes, we have a ways to go. Sacramento is saying you still, are over-identifying, but I just want you to appreciate context. And so for the next leader and leadership of this district, we have to continue this good work of, yes, it's a general ed and special ed thing that we have to solve. It's not just one or the other. And so often special ed just gets handed this problem and say, go fix it, when in fact it's everybody. So just pulled that up, thought, what was it? Oh yeah, it was 45%. So really good progress. Thank you, team. Thanks for everybody's work. Okay, public comment on the last item.
Yes, we have one request to speak on item H6, Mr. Craig Lewis.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to just commend the superintendent for putting forward an excellent plan. And my name is Craig Lewis. I'm a resident of Santa Barbara. I grew up in Santa Barbara. Just moved back here about a year ago after being away for 35 years for college and career and all that kind of stuff. And I run a nonprofit by the name of Clean Coalition, which is has the mission to accelerate the transition to renewable energy and a modern grid. And I am very pleased to see the report that came forward, the study and the request to move solar and storage and solar-driven microgrids forward on the campuses. And would like to, I was also very pleased to see the strong emphasis on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, including to make electric vehicle charging infrastructure available to community members, people who live in multi-unit housing, that it's very hard to get electric vehicle charging into those properties sometimes, a lot of times. And so having that available at the schools is really tremendous. I'd just like to encourage the board to move this study process forward as fast as possible. I think that the schools are overdue. I actually attended Santa Barbara Unified School District schools. I went to Adams, La Cumbre Junior High, and San Marcos. And I have a son at Santa Barbara High School right now, so I had to kind of convert from a Royal to being a Don. Anyway, really happy to see this report going forward. And I will say that I'm somewhat of an expert on this topic. We have a big initiative. My organization, the Clean Coalition, has a big initiative in the Santa Barbara region to get a community microgrid that will bring renewables-driven resilience to the whole community and help us weather these public safety power shutoffs and also the actual disasters that can come, right? Everybody's focused on these proactive shutdowns, but there's actual real disasters and fires, landslides, and earthquakes that can turn our power off for very long periods of time. And the plan that was put forward will help address that. And I think at the end of the day, the plan calls for evaluating the economics on multiple possible approaches.
30 seconds.
Okay. And I think that the power purchase agreement will be the one that will win the day for the reasons that were kind of delineated in the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Matsuoka.
All right, this topic has been in production in my mind for about 5 years. And then recently, in the last few months, just full disclosure, Craig and I met about 2 months ago, and really gave me a glimpse of the world of power purchase agreements today, which is, it really has evolved and matured, and yet there's still the same risks and financial questions to ask before a district dives into this. All right, so let's start with vision. So this is visionary. This is solar energy on every possible rooftop and parking lot. And now battery storage systems. Let's see, the last 6 months, the word PSPS has become part of our vocabulary, public safety power shutoffs. What the state of California needs to solve in the next, 3 to 5 years is going to be interesting, political, and I think intense. I'm really glad I live in Southern California and not Northern California today. I won't disparage a company. And for about 2 weeks, when I couldn't get my Leaf into the garage, I had to scrounge for electrical vehicle charging stations in Santa Barbara, and I realized this place is kind of a desert. I charged at Peabody. I charged at the city lots. We didn't have ours in front of the district office. I learned it was a real challenge to charge a car through public tools. There's just hardly any. And now this new, I would say, vision of community microgrids, where we can withstand a power shutoff of 3 to 5 days. And in the narrative, I outlined how I think schools are going to be places of refuge. We are Red Cross emergency shelters, but if we don't have power, we're not going to be any good. And so if we can build out this infrastructure, it will be tremendous. And it's even created a personal vision at my house. Like, I want to get a battery in my house so I can, be a community resource for my street. The challenge is financing this. I just put a ballpark number of $40 million to build this out. That's a lot of money. Our GEO bond, Measure I and J, is pretty much spoken for. That was not included in the bond language. We were finding ways to get, solar on new construction, but to do this magnitude of scope is way beyond Measure I and J. And I don't see asking the community for another facility bond in the near future. I mean, 2016, honestly, we should give the community some breathing space with facility bond programs. So the other alternative is called a power purchase agreement. And I outlined the really extensive explanation in the narrative. Here's a quick summary. That a company finances it, well, actually designs it, finances it, builds, manages the system. Basically, they build a utility company on our property, and we buy the electricity from that company. Over the typical length is 25 years. You can go shorter, 20 years, but that gets financially more difficult. There's a tension of the equipment eventually ages out. And so if you do a 30-year payment schedule, so to speak, your equipment could be obsolete in 20 to 25. And the basic idea is that company gets their income back or their investment back through our electricity payments, and they need to make a profit. They're in it to make money. Our goal is that we want to save money over the length of the contract. All right, so the most important risk, well, actually there's many things to solve as part of negotiations. The escalation rate for electricity is a huge unknown. Okay, I did a lot of research. I went to Bureau of Labor Statistics. It was interesting. I was surprised that the inflation rate, I put in the notes, anybody, it was like 2%, something like that. It was lower than I'd heard. Who knows what's going to happen with the inflation rate on electricity? It could go up, but it could also go down. There are some future innovations that we don't know about. I think there's going to be some short-term, I would say, costs for our major utility companies to build out how to withstand all of the wildfires and natural disasters. But it's really important to negotiate that inflation rate. And I put into the narrative, if you had locked in 1994, when it turns out it was a high point of trend, and then it flattened out, 25 years later, today you'd be paying about, I think it was 26 cents per kilowatt hour. And our cost today right now as a district is about 15 cents. So if you buy into an inflation rate that you think, oh, that looks pretty good, and then 10 years you realize, wait, we're overpaying for electricity compared to market rate. 20 years, it's worse. Buyout clause. What happens to the equipment at the end of the lease? Because technically they own it. Now, I don't know of a company who's going to come in and remove it, like get on your roofs and your parking lots and rip it out, but there's got to be clear language about the end of that. We also have to be careful about this contract being sold to another company. What I've learned is sometimes these power purchase agreements, they are commoditized and turned into a packaged financial vehicle that is sold essentially on the bond market. So then who owns this contract for us? So what's ahead for us? The next step is to find a company that can ultimately design and manage this 25-year agreement. It's got to be a company that's an expert on the engineering side, the finance side, the maintenance. I mean, it's a big process. So 2 steps. We are recommending an RFP to find the best consulting company to conceptually design the system, and then to find the best future PPA company that's actually going to build it out. And to me, that there are those 2 steps. And there are consultants in that first step. I think there's consultants who want to do both. That's my sense out in the market. And there's some companies who are in step 2, but they want to be step 1. But here's the deal. We've got to negotiate this with a vendor where we're going to be in some pretty complex negotiations. And so I think finding an expert consultant who can help us negotiate with that big company makes the right sense. So I think it's in the narrative. Craig Price has met with our sustainability twice. Putting out an RFP for this is really, it's different, it's complicated. But Craig is, my experience, he's very creative. He understands the nuances. We've given him some language to incorporate, and he's working on that RFP because we're going to receive proposals, but evaluating this when we haven't gotten into the actual financial negotiations is going to be, it's just a complicated process. So we think we're going to have an RFP letter ready in about maybe 2 weeks. What we'd like to do is tonight get direction from the board. Do you want us to continue down this research? And if so, I'll give you some answers about the RFP process. So that was a lot. Questions or comments?
Board. Question, Ms. Capps?
Thank you, and thanks for putting this forward. It's thrilling. I would love to just ask a couple questions. You spoke to the risks, and I think it's very important to highlight those. But if you could speak to the cost savings that you anticipate. I know you don't have a number, but you did include in the board report that this PPA should save the district money in the first year of operation. So I just think it's important when we talk about it, especially with a sort of a guess at $40 million, that we do emphasize that this is about cost savings. And so maybe you can speak to that.
Right. So the capital costs are all borne by that future company. Our cost should be zero to go into this. But now the cost benefit ratio. So we pay about 15 cents per kilowatt hour. We've looked at that multiple ways. So I would want to negotiate a payment rate that's less than 15 cents per kilowatt hour in year one. Now, if the rate from Edison starts climbing, so this is where the negotiation of our inflation rate becomes a factor. But we just want to pay less per kilowatt hour than we're currently paying. So that's the goal in this contract.
Thank you. And I know you, it sounds like you did a lot of research, which I certainly appreciate. I know that many school districts have done this. Are there any that we should pay attention to that you found, or is that in the next phase, to sort of make sure we're consistent with success stories elsewhere?
What I learned out in the field is there are now consultants and experts that are helping districts establish new PPAs, but also to get out of older or not so good PPAs. And so I think I've expressed my concerns and skepticism about power purchase agreements as your superintendent. I will continue to be very skeptical, but also hopeful that we can find the right package. There are other districts who've gone into this. Certainly we can get a list of referrals. The bottom line is that contract's got to save us money in year one, and I'm especially interested in the buyout clause at the end of the lease, because I'm hearing some new creative ways to help that be a financial benefit to a school district. My prior district had a very, I would say, unfavorable buyout clause, and so that's why we worked hard to buy out that power purchase agreement. And so those are the factors. We'll listen to other districts that have recently got into a power purchase contract, but I just want a quick summary. I want to know what's the inflation rate and what's the end of lease and what happens if you transfer the contract. Those are the things to look for.
Thank you. And my last question is about microgrids, and it again was thrilled to see a move to that as well. And I recently attended a stakeholder meeting of people in the climate resiliency space. It was invite only, fire chiefs, county supervisors, et cetera. I think Mr. Lewis was there, and about 125 people. And after a day of meeting and hearing presentations from those who were directly involved in the Thomas Fire and mudslide and our community, and from that perspective of knowing that these extreme climate events are kind of our new normal, what that means here, and this meeting took place, by the way, at Direct Relief, which is a microgrid, and which means, I just think it would be helpful for the public, especially hearing this very visionary and brand new proposal, to unpack that a little bit and what that would mean, what that vision is for our schools. I think I understand it, but I think it would be helpful to hear for our schools to serve as a microgrid for the surrounding community.
Yeah, to keep this report focused on what we have to get done in the next month, it's just this much. But I would love to explain what the microgrid concept is. It's becoming possible because the battery technology has gotten better, and again, more research. I don't think it's lithium-ion batteries. I think it's new technologies that are coming online. Yeah, direct relief is. I saw the specs from Mr. Lewis. Like, they can survive for like weeks, but they need to because they are going to be providing relief for, entire geographies. So.
Well, thank you. I mean, I will conclude my questions by complimenting. This is a bold vision. I'm thrilled. It feels like a new day, and I look forward to the next steps. Thanks.
Additional comments? Dr. Reed?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Matsuoka. I appreciate your pushing this forward. I think it's an important for our district to move forward in sustainability, and so I want to acknowledge that. I know that the focus of this vision is really looking at our facilities, and so I'm just here to sort of voice the teaching and learning side of this. What was interesting, actually, we had the group of students here from the different high schools, and we spoke around sustainability. And what came from that conversation resonated with me, because a lot of the students talked about the fact that they wanted to see more in the curriculum or what they were doing. They wanted to see more emphasis and push towards administration and push towards educators to really talk about this and have conversations about it and brainstorm around it. Specifically, I took some notes. They want the teachers to have goals in terms of the work they want to do around sustainability. So what are they doing in the classroom? And I was curious, and I only spoke with a small group in my table, but they shared that they had learned about sustainability more in AP Biology and AP Environmental Science, but where they hadn't seen it, and they said it was evident in chemistry, but in physics and bio. But I think what came up in the conversation too, a student brought up, is how this could be brought forward in the health curriculum, and how looking at it in personal health, actually you repeated what she said, personal health and planet health. And how can we relate the two? So it begs a question to really understand what we do, and I'm sure we do a lot. I know we have our new science framework that we had adopted a couple of years ago. And I guess what I would like, I would like to know really what are we doing K-12 to support this. Because what the students spoke to, and what I believe also, is we need to understand, we need to be educated as students, and why are we doing this? Why are we doing this with our facilities? So I guess what I would like to ask is if we could get a report on what exists currently, what is being done currently around this across the K-12 school district. I know we met specifically with secondary, but it would be interesting to know what we are doing and actually acknowledge what we are doing, and then maybe see where there might be gaps for work for us to do potentially in perhaps environmental education, nature-based, place-based education that links to our garden programs, et cetera.
Good evening again. I can take a pass for secondary. I hear the request for a report. I don't know if Dr. Ramirez can speak a little bit to elementary, and we can go from there. You alluded to the new science frameworks, and we in science call those the next generation science standards, or NGSS. And they do actually have a separate strand of learning that is specifically dedicated to Earth and space systems, or Earth science. Districts have the option of having that as a separate course, or integrating the Earth science standards into what we would call sort of the traditional subjects we're used to seeing secondary students undertake. Our 7th and 8th grade science classes do integrate all, the sciences, physics and biology and chemistry learning with earth science. And then in high school, in our physics, chem, bio sequence, the earth science standards are specifically woven in not only, into the teaching and learning experience that a student has that year, but are also integrated with the core concepts in those traditional disciplines. So, for example, in 7th grade, there's learning about the carbon cycle, which came up tonight at the opening of our student session. There's learning about photosynthesis and respiration. We learn in 8th grade about biodiversity and the delicacy, how delicate, the delicateness of the web of life and things like that. There is less in physics, as you heard the students say, but virtually the whole second semester of chemistry and our newly revamped curriculum for chemistry is actually framed through climate change. And so there's 5 or 6 units of study that are common across the high schools where the entire second half of chemistry is framed in climate, in terms of climate change. In 11th grade, there's a revisiting of ecosystems and the carbon cycle, but in a much more sophisticated way. So those are more than just openings or entry points for where sustainability can be talked about. Those are things that are part of the science curriculum. The other thing to say is that the way that NGSS operates is they have building blocks of curriculum like cross-cutting concepts and science and engineering practices, there's an interplay between engineering standards and solving complex problems, and there is even a specific call out in the earth science standards, it's the 3rd strand of them, to unpack human impact. So that's actually a strand that is, they call it ESS 3, that is woven through K through 12. And so that human impact strand goes all along everything I just mentioned about what gets special attention in grades 7 through 12. So that's a little, at least, preliminary overview of these topics in the secondary grades.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, board. As it relates to the elementary, in grades K-5, we have moved forward with full option science sequence, which is content derived from the Lawrence Hall of Science or in collaboration with the Lawrence Hall of Science. These are all built on modules that at every grade level basically deal with natural phenomena. So in kindergarten, for example, trees and weather is one example of how students would learn how to begin to make sense of climate, weather, and the distinction between the two. And then that just matriculates all the way on through to 5th grade. And all of these are grounded in investigations that happen in the classroom. In 6th grade, we have our ocean science sequence. That is not a curriculum as the 7th and 8th grade middle school curriculum is being fleshed out. That has been a staple for us and has capitalized on obviously our natural resources here in the being a coastal city. Beyond that, many other activities. I won't go into an exhaustive list, but rather a representative one. We have gardening as part of our regular business or daily business in our schools. Explore Ecology, that partnership continues. And so, and taking it into the physical education realm. Something that came up in, at least in my group, were practices around just being able to reduce the carbon footprint for just transportation and moving about our community. And so biking is actually a staple of our elementary physical education program starting as early as 3rd grade. So it's really well represented. We can certainly continue to do more and be more intentional, but it's woven very well within our elementary classrooms already with promise of better and more in the future.
Thank you both. I wanted to just point out too, some of the students came up to me and said, well, we're here to talk about this, but what happens after this? And, you know, do we just talk about it and then we just leave it alone? And I said, well, no, because it's about taking action. And so I want to just speak back to a year ago when we did meet with the students around other topics, that this would be a great opportunity for them to actually brainstorm. They were talking about how they can take and make a difference in their own school sites relational to the food or bike a week, you know, day a week, or there was discussion around having more opportunities for bicycles, bike racks. So I'm wondering if we can maybe forward that, if we can have that again framed for opportunities for them to have these discussions and come up with an action that supports sustainability that they feel is important for their school site or for what they vote on or believe in, and be able to come back and share with us the processes that they're taking and what supports they might need. And that's really, I guess, Sean, you had taken the lead on
I'll
that.
respond. I was pleased to hear, even from our principals, I'm thinking particularly of Principal Woodard during the study session, but also from others afterwards, just about their own interest in carrying the conversations forward back at their school sites. I'll credit Dr. Simmons with, I don't think any of us were able to be at that same table where she was, Ms. Chate was as a cabinet member, but one of the things that I think she ended up talking with the students about is, to reiterate what you opened with, just the power of their voice. And that sometimes what happens is, I think an administrator, any school leader can play a really pivotal role in sort of unleashing the student voice so that the teachers can hear it. And that is often better received on the part of teachers when they hear directly from students about what it is students yearn to see reflected in the curriculum, what students are interested in the curriculum, as opposed to something where there's a lot of prescription about what everyone will do in terms of concepts, themes, or in what order and things like that. So already we're having, as a result of this, after this evening's experience, conversations about sort of how to orchestrate experiences back at sites that would allow for a forum in which teachers hear from students about the kinds of things we were able to hear from them about tonight. So that was a really great kind of way to think about it, and that's going to frame our conversations the next time we meet as leaders.
Great, because I said that I would talk to you about it, and that we do really appreciate their voices. We do want to hear their voices, and we do want them to know that we are here. We're not just here to listen and then check that off our box, that it really is about how do we link it all together? How do we link the work that we're doing to really transform our district to be sustainable, and the work that we're doing in teaching and learning to transform minds around what we need to be thinking about in our global world and the challenges that we face. So I look forward to hearing how that might be orchestrated. And I want to just acknowledge, I know it takes a lot of effort and collaboration, and I want to acknowledge what you did last year was really powerful for us to hear from students who came up and spoke about passionately of what they wanted to change and what they did. So I think in the time frame you'll have to make the ultimate decision as to how that would pan out. But I appreciate your listening.
Thank you.
Additional comments, Board? Ms. Munoz?
Yes, I just want to also echo, what Dr. Reed is saying. I think that the conversation with the students about sustainability was enlightening. In our group, it was their seniors, and Dr. Becchio joined us for that conversation. And they were already saying how they wanted the learning to start with the freshmen in their school, and then also in the other schools, in the other high schools. So, it's very exciting to be a part of this and see how it's developed by all of you. They asked about being able to come to the school board meeting and share their concerns and keep that conversation going. So thank you.
Okay, I think that concludes comments. I just would say I appreciate the conversation here, and I really want to learn more and understand it a lot better in more depth. But I do have a question about budget in terms of, we were talking about one-time money versus ongoing. So how is that being, thought about in this process? It may be a one-time, if you will, windfall. What about, and then we start to get used to that? How are we looking at the long haul with regards to budgeting?
Could you narrow that question a little bit?
Just tell me how we're going to keep our money going.
Yeah. The one-time money in the past was connected to, I would say, efforts and materials that did not involve ongoing personnel. So those were good past decisions. But when it's been in place for like 3 years, for example, the professional development has been funded through mandated money. I see head nods. So, but now it's been going for 3 years that our staff looks forward to the June PD and all of the professional development. And so that's a good expectation we want our staff to have. So I think the task of your cabinet team is give you some recommendations about how do we sustain that. But we are looking at, okay, we can't continue the spending at past levels. So maybe it's not full program, maybe it's 2/3 of what we did with PD. As far as the future, I keep watching our local property scene. I keep waiting for that annual assess valuation report, and Ms. Jate will comment through first interim what we've received from the county tax assessor's office. She doesn't like it when I say it's helpful news, because it is, but it's not like some of our partner district scenarios. So we have to be slow and disciplined. And so what we're going to present is just some preliminary recommendations about as we plan for next year, because some of our position decisions really need to be decided by March, because if we're going to enter a hiring process, then we've got to know what those are. So we've got about a month before we put that first interim report together for you. You will see some recommendations and then some questions, and these are questions that involve, your value decisions about all of this. Because it really does come down to, I wish we had the money of some of our neighboring districts, but we have a responsibility to spend the money that we receive. And so it always comes down to trade-offs.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it moves us next to our coming events. And I believe tomorrow we have the State of Schools.
Yes, we do.
I was off by one day. What time is that?
7:30 is breakfast, and then I will start at 8:15.
8:15, and that's the Victoria Theater.
At the
correct?
Vic, yes.
Okay. All right. Are there coming events that we need to be aware of? Okay. Future agenda items, I believe those are on the Friday letter. You're able to look at it there and add them there. I don't think we have any future, unless you have some tonight. Okay. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, December 16th. Monday, December 16th. That was a change. So we want to make sure that we put that on our calendars and note that change as well. I think with that, we can call for adjournment. Oh, 9:10. Yes. All right. Thank you all for staying with us and supporting and having the conversation. Thank board members. Until we meet again.